Is there a good time to cash in an RRSP before retirement? Ted's here. Let's begin.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Okay, I'm going to break with format and just give the answer to today's question right now, so you don't have to listen to the rest of the show. Is there a good time to do an early RRSP withdrawal? Yes. Yes, there is. And
I mean, I can leave now?
That's right. You can go. And other times it's a disaster. So we'll put the timestamps in the show notes. If you want to skip ahead, feel free. So Ted, in 20 seconds or less,
right?
Got to keep this show moving here. What's an RRSP and why do they exist?
Registered Retirement Savings Plan. They were created by the government years ago so that people would make savings supplemental to the government pensions for their retirement.
There you go. So pretty simple.
Yep.
And they aren't just for rich people.
They are just for rich people.
They are just for
Only
rich people.
the rich folk can afford to put the maximum. The people that are putting in $1,000, $2,000 a year, they're fooling themselves, and the government's taking advantage.
Well, I guess it depends. Are they assuming that $1,000 a year put away will fund their entire retirement? Probably not. But if they're looking at it as a supplement to, well, I'm going to get CPP and OAS, I guess, okay, maybe it's a little bit extra. But
it'll cause their OAS to be reduced.
Well,
so there's a math you got to do to figure out, have you got enough in your RSPs that you actually should keep them? That's a different conversation.
There are potentially some issues. So, well, and there are a lot of companies that have group RSPs as well.
Right,
so
like us.
Like us. So if you're an employee at Hoyes Michaelis, you got a plan, and we kick in some as well. So, okay. So back to the question, though. Is there ever a good time to cash in an RRSP? And, of course, the biggest benefit of an RRSP is the tax break.
When you're putting the money in.
When you put the money in.
Right.
But, of course, when you take the money out.
When you take the money out. So you got to be careful. It's a balancing act.
So if my tax rate is 40% and I put in $1,000, what does that mean to me in cash?
Oh, $400.
$400. And if I'm retired and I'm in a 40% tax bracket and I take $1,000 out,
you're going to pay $400.
I'm going to pay $400. So it's a deferral is what I'm doing.
Really? That's right.
Now, I guess the theory is, well, when I retire, my tax bracket might only be 30%. So I put it in and got $400 back. It compounded tax free. And then when I take it out, I only have to pay $300 on the $1,000. Okay. So maybe it makes sense. So, okay.
Of course, is your $300 worth anything?
Well, this is it. Well, hopefully
you might have to take $2,000 out to have the same buying power as the $1,000 you put in.
Hopefully it's worth a lot more at that point. So,
right.
Okay. So let's take a look at two different scenarios here when I withdraw money from my RSP.
Okay.
Because again, the question we're answering is there ever a good time to cash in an RSP before retirement? So we just talked about the retired one. Mm-hmm. The theory being your tax rate's lower, so you pay less tax. That all makes sense. But if you are not retired, then what's the problem with taking money out of your RSP?
Well, it immediately becomes taxed in the year that you take it out. So if you take out $5,000 or less, they tax it at 15%. Well, if you're in a 25 or 30% tax bracket, that means you automatically you're going to owe taxes at the end of the year because you've got more income now and they haven't taxed it at the high enough rate.
Well, and you raise a very key point, which is not in our script here because I put these things together pretty quickly. And that is that withholdings at source is different than the tax you pay at the end of the year.
Correct. Don't assume that if you, again, the example, you take $5,000 out and they hold back, $750, that's all the tax you owe on that. The $5,000 gets added to whatever other income that you have, and you pay tax at whatever the going rate is for all of your income.
So if I've got a job and I'm making, X number of dollars a year and I'm in the 40% tax bracket, any money I take out of my RSP is going to be taxed at least at 40%.
At least.
And it could be higher if it then pushes me into a higher tax bracket. And we've certainly seen that before. I think the lowest tax bracket is probably 15%. And you take out a bunch of money from your RSP, that pushes all of your income into the 20, 25, 30% bracket. It gets really expensive. That's the problem with taking money out early. But there's another problem. So you pay potentially high taxes on withdrawal.
Right.
But you are also burning your contribution room.
Right. When you take money out of an RSP, the government doesn't say, well, we'll let you put that back later. It's just gone.
But with a TFSA, they do.
TFSAs are strange. I mean,
TFSAs are strange.
Not a fan.
So, well, and that's the difference. With an RRSP, you get contribution room based on your income.
Right. But you also get a tax savings based on those contributions. So the real difference between the TFSA is there's no benefit from a tax perspective to putting the money in the plan.
You don't get a deduction when you put it in.
There's no credit. There's nothing. Whereas with the RSPs, they're not going to let you get that deduction back the second time you put the money in.
Gotcha. That's the key point. So with a TFSA, a tax-free savings plan, you can put money in, you can take money out, and when you take money out, that resets your contribution.
You put your left buck
in and back it out too. We'll play some music behind us today. So yes, if I've got $1,000, if I put $1,000 in my TFSA and then take it out, well, next year I can put that $1,000 back in. It resets. With an RSP, you get this much every year based on your income, and once you've used it up, that's it.
Right.
So you take it out, it's gone forever.
And I suspect that rule was put in place because RSPs have been around for a long time and TFSAs haven't been.
Well, I think it's what you said earlier. With a TFSA, you don't get a tax break when you put it in.
Right. But there's some logic. If I'm going to get taxed on this money when I take it out of the RSP, then why don't I get the contribution room back?
Well, okay.
I'm not a policy guy,
no.
but that's,
Well, so I guess if any politicians or if policy experts are watching, you can put a comment on YouTube, because I'm sure you're all going to
jump all over this.
The point is, I don't know. We don't know.
Well, the point is, you get a tax break when you put a contribution in an RRSP. Right now, you don't with a TFSA. That's really the basis of the difference.
So, okay, now with that background, took us,
now that we've confused you all.
Took us 6 minutes to get to the heart of the show here. Is there ever a good time to cash in an RRSP before retirement? So I'm going to give you some reasons, times when it would be.
Okay.
The first obvious answer is the New Home Buyers Program.
Right.
Okay, so I think the title is self-explanatory, but explain in basic terms, what is the New Home Buyers Program?
So you haven't owned a home before. You're borrowing from your RSP for the down payment. And effectively, every year they're going to tell you have to put so much of it back or it's added to your taxable income.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
So the current maximum, and we are recording this in 2024. So if you're watching this 5 years in the future, it might be different. But as of right now, if you're a first-time home buyer, you can borrow up to $35,000 from your RSP and pay it back, and you've got 15 years to pay it back.
Right.
And the rule is you pay it back starting the second year after you made your first withdrawal. So if your first withdrawal was in 2024, their first repayment is due in 2026. And you have 15 years to repay it. So $35,000 divided by 15, $2,300 a year. I guess it's $2,333.33 per year for 15 years. So you're borrowing it from yourself.
Correct.
And so when I take the money out, I don't have to pay tax on it.
Right.
What happens if I don't pay back the $2,000 I'm supposed to?
So if you don't make that $2,300 payment every year, then $2,300 gets added to your taxable income for the year. It's as if you took it out and you'll pay whatever the full tax rate is on it.
And when you do your taxes, on your notice of assessment at the bottom, it says, here's your New Home Buyers Program. Here's where you're at. Here's what you took out. Here's what you got to pay back. So you want to be very careful that you understand what those limits are.
Right.
So if you are buying a home for the first time, is it a good idea to borrow from your RSP to get the money out?
Well, so think of the timing of this. Let's say you're buying your first house and you haven't contributed anything to RSPs in the past, and maybe family or friends are going to give you a gift. Well, if you put the money in an RSP and then borrow it for the down payment, that $35,000, you'll also get then a tax refund on the $35,000 at whatever your marginal rate is right now. So it's starting to get a little confusing.
Well, but you're right. So you can load up your RSP. I don't believe there's any time constraints. So if your mother says to you, okay, Ted, I'm going to help you buy your first house. I'm going to gift you $35,000.
Right.
You could put it in your RSP, and there's probably some holding period. I don't know. We're not experts in this.
I don't think there is.
I'm not aware of it, but someone will tell us in the comments if we're wrong. So you're right. You put the $35,000 in, and if you're in the 20% tax bracket, that's $7,000 in refunds you're getting.
Buy some appliances.
Or bigger down payment then.
Right.
So it makes perfect sense in that scenario to use the New Home Buyers Program.
But you're not actually withdrawing money from your RSP. You're borrowing money from your RSP. And there's a fundamental difference between the two. You have to put it back or you get taxed on it.
So you better have thought out your cash flow, I guess.
The plan. You got to have a plan in place.
Now, there is that 2-year deferral right up front, but you got to be saying to yourself, okay, so if it's $2,300 a year I'm going to have to put back, that's $200 a month almost.
Right.
So you got to think that 2 years from now, my mortgage payment's actually $200 higher notionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I better put that back. Now, if you're part of a group RSP at work and you're contributing every month or every paycheck, you can designate some of that as your new home buyer's repayment.
That's true.
But then you're not getting the deduction for what you put in.
Correct.
So you gotta be careful. Okay. So bottom line is, yeah, sure. It's a perfectly good idea if you're a first-time home buyer and you got money in your RSP and you can afford to pay it back. Okay. Category number 2. The lifelong learning plan.
I don't think most people even heard of this thing.
So, and this is nowhere near as big as the new home buyers program. Tell me what the cue cards tell you about this particular
So
plan.
you can withdraw up to $10,000 in a calendar year to finance full-time training or education for yourself, your spouse, your common law spouse.
What about my kids?
Doesn't apply to your kids.
Does not apply to your kids. So you can withdraw for up to 4 calendar years, up to a maximum of $20,000.
Which the math doesn't work.
I know. Okay. So if I take $10,000 the first year, $10,000 the second year, I'm done.
I'm done.
That's it. And you must repay within 10 years, 1/10 per year. Okay. So this is kind of like the way the new home buyers program works, only shorter and less money.
But the math works out the same. Basically, you got to pay $2,000 back instead of $2,300
if you've maxed it out. So, okay. I mean, this kind of makes sense if you are going back to school. This would not make sense for an 18-year-old going to school for the first time because you haven't built up any RSP contribution room.
Probably.
So you want to, so could I get my student loan, put it in my RSP, and then withdraw it?
Probably.
We're going to get in trouble for
better to use your student grant, right? Whatever.
Yeah. So there may be ways to do it. So again, not a huge amount of dollars. So, okay. So those are 2 obvious examples where we would both agree, sure, makes sense to take money out of your RSP.
Right. But again, you're not withdrawing the money, you're borrowing the money. That's a fundamental difference there.
Well, you are withdrawing it, meaning taking it out, but you're not, there must be a different word we should be using.
You're borrowing it.
You're borrowing it. Yeah, there you go.
That's what the government says.
Okay, so we are in favor of borrowing.
Assuming you have a plan to put it back.
Assuming there's a plan to put it back. And, okay, so those are 2 obvious examples.
Well, and that'll fit into our next example too. If you've got a short-term need for money, you could withdraw it as long as you're planning on putting it back. But you're still going to get penalized. Okay,
so let's go through that scenario then. Right. So we're saying in the 2 examples we've given, it makes sense to withdraw because before you retire, because you can get the money out, use it for something now, don't have to pay tax on it. But the bigger question, you're right, is, okay, I need money now because living costs are going up, we got inflation, we got budget pressures, whatever. So should I use the RSP to make ends meet? So what if my living expenses are high? And I want to take out, let's say, $500 every month from my RSP to make ends meet. Is that a good strategy or not?
So from a long-term perspective, you're borrowing from your future retirement. So the first answer is going to be it's not a good strategy. Now, the second, though, is if it's a temporary measure, like you've got an end in sight, you know what's going to happen for the next 6 months, things are going to get better, I can replace it, I can correct all of this, then maybe it's okay.
So if I've lost my job, well, I guess a temporary situation would be I have a medical issue.
Yeah, maybe.
And I know I'm going to be off work for 3 months.
Well, you got to take a family leave because you're doing the caregiver thing for your parents.
There you go.
That's a pretty typical one now.
Or maybe I just gave birth or something.
I think that's physiologically impossible, but I understand.
Not today, it isn't. So there's some, but the point is it's temporary. I know that at some point I'll be back to work.
And there's a plan.
So it's like, okay, my living costs are $3,000 a month. EI is going to cover, less than $2,000 a month. I need to supplement it. I'm going to cut back on some of my expenses, but yeah, if I could get $500 out, that would be good. And I guess in that scenario, because my employment income will be lower during that period, I'm not suffering quite as much of a tax hit.
Right. The real hit you're suffering there is you don't get the contribution room back.
Once you've taken it out, it's
you
gone.
Are literally withdrawing in this particular case. Even if you make contributions that year, so the net effect is you didn't take any money out, that's not how the government's going to treat it. You took money out, and that's so your contribution limits are going to be used up.
Yeah. Now, I guess if you're, 40 years old and you've got $300,000 worth of contribution room built up, then taking $2,000 or $3,000 out, okay,
doesn't matter.
No big deal.
Right.
I'm probably never going to max it out anyways. The better option, obviously, is to do whatever you can to balance your budget so you don't need to do that.
Right.
But that's easier said than done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my expenses are high. Like what am I supposed to do? Have you been to a grocery store recently? Like it's kind of hard.
Well, you want the crazy example of that?
Give me the crazy example.
Yeah, you're now 62 years old. You can take early CPP if you want, but you've got money in your RSPs. Maybe you should be deliberately drawing down your RSPs for the last couple of years, deferring applying for your CPP, so that one, it doesn't claw back your OAS, and two, you're at a lower tax rate because you're drawing your RSPs when you got no other income.
Sounds very Machiavellian, but you're right. And I guess one of the overall themes here is, as with everything in finance, you got to crunch the numbers.
Right.
So you can start drawing CPP at the age of 60,
right?
Or you can wait till the age of 70.
Is it 70, 69? Doesn't matter.
Whatever it is.
Yep. I'm getting closer.
Yeah, me too.
Hey, speak louder.
Hey, I got the letter from them saying, hey, do you want to start taking it? So that tells you how old we both are. And you really do have to crunch the numbers, because if I start taking my CPP at the age of 60, it's going to be lower than if I start taking it at the age of 70.
Yeah,
if
two-thirds lower.
Well, yeah, significantly. And if I keep working, I am building up more CPP room potentially, because it's based on, how much you've earned.
Right.
But what you're saying is, okay, so I'm 62 years old. I'm going to retire now, but I'm not going to draw my CPP.
Right.
And so it will continue to increase. Now, obviously, my lifelong earnings aren't going to increase. So I guess that's why you'd have to do the math to see what difference it makes.
Yep.
But, okay, I got a bunch of money in my RSP. Why don't I take that out for the next 3 years? And if that's my only source of income,
might be taxed at a lower rate.
It'll be taxed at a lower rate. That's all math you got to do. So, wow. So there you go. Lots of math to do. And if you go to Service Canada, they do have a calculator that'll tell you how much you'll get in CPP
if you do it
and all the rest of it. Okay.
Assuming we're not all killed by Russians or something.
Well, who knows? Who knows? Well, and you're right. That's the other side of it. It's like, well, my family has a history of not living very long. Yeah. So
my family has a history of congestive heart failure. I don't know that I'm going to be around.
Well, there you
70,
go.
Right?
Or you have a lifestyle where you're driving race cars and jumping out of airplanes.
We don't know anybody like that.
So that might cause you to rethink it. So we talked about job loss. Illness would be kind of the same thing, right? Like it's purely a time frame question.
That's right. When are you going to be able to return to work?
And if you can't predict that, like sometimes it's easy. Okay, I broke my leg. I know it takes 3 months before I'll be able to walk again and do my construction job.
Right.
So there's a pretty clearly defined system. If it's I've got this thing and the doctors really don't know what it is, then it's a little harder to figure out. Or
if you have complications because they screw up.
Well, there you go. Which can happen. I'm told. So it's a tough call, because I need the money now, but I don't want to burn it for later.
So here's something else people should think about. Your creditors can't go after your RRSPs. So they can, depending on the plan that you're in, they might be able to go after the contributions you put in the last 12 months. But if something goes really wrong for you, you got $1 million in your RRSP, people can't go after that unless you take it out.
Okay, so let's talk about that then, which is debt.
Right.
So I've got a job, I'm working, but I've got a bunch of debt.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously everyone knows from our Hoyes Michaelis Joe Debtor bankruptcy study that our average client has around $54,000 worth of unsecured debt.
Right.
Credit cards, bank loans, taxes, that sort of thing. So what if you are in that situation where I've got, whatever the amount is, and you can make up whatever example you want. If I've got, let's take an example where I've got a really small amount of debt.
Right.
Okay. It's $5,000. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether that's small or large. It's all relative.
It's all relative.
But okay, I've got this credit card, or maybe it's a high interest lender. I'm paying a lot of interest on it.
Yep.
My RSP is earning 5% a year, and I'm paying 40% on this loan, or 35% if the new rules ever come in.
Right.
So would it not make sense to say, you know what, I'm going to take the $5,000 out? What's the thought process there?
It may very well. So you take the $5,000 out. Well, $5,000 won't be enough. You're going to have to withdraw probably at least $8,000 to cover the $5,000 you have in debt, because remember, they'll be withholding, and you want to set aside enough additional money for the extra tax you're going to pay based on whatever your income is. So, but that's still, even if you have to say, let's be really pessimistic, say you have to take $10,000 out to pay off the $5,000 in debt, leave enough for the taxes. That's still better than paying 45% interest on the $5,000 for the year.
So if I've got a loan, let's say it's a $5,000 loan, and let's say the interest rate is 40% and it's a 5-year loan, I'm going to end up paying well over $10,000 on that loan, am I not?
If you don't repay the principal, so if you're just paying the interest, that's right.
So even if it's amortized over 5 years, it's still a huge number that I'm paying.
It is.
What is it, the rule of 72? You take the interest rate, divide by 72. That tells you how long it's compounding.
Right.
Well, 40% every 2 years, it's compounding. So would you then suggest actually doing that math? If I continue to pay the loan based on its schedule, here's how much I'll pay, and compare that to if I cash in the RSP and pay all the tax.
Yeah, it would have been far better actually before you took out that stupid loan at 45% to have done this math and said, I'm better off to just take the money out of my RSP. But it's too late for that. We've already got the debt.
Right. So, well, and I guess if I took the loan out last month, what the difference?
Well, and it had to happen.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of the same
You needed
numbers.
the cash yesterday.
Well, and let's face it, the clients we're dealing with, my car broke down.
Right.
Something happened. I lost my job. Something happened to my house, whatever. I need the money. So, okay. So if it's a relatively, moderate amount, okay, it probably makes sense.
Yep.
Let's take the case though, where it's much higher. So let's say I've got our typical client, $50,000 worth of debt,
right,
and I've got $50,000 in my RSP that I've saved up over the last few years.
Okay.
Would you recommend cashing in the RSP to pay off the debt?
Almost never.
Right.
And so first, remember what I said a couple minutes ago, that RRSP is protected. If you don't take it out, the creditors can't take it from you either. The whole idea with an RRSP is that you've made savings for the future. And so your future self is entitled to that money. You're not entitled to it now. If you take it out, it's no longer protected. And if you only have $50,000 in the RSP, it's not going to be enough to pay off the debts anyway.
So explain about protected then. So I've got $50,000 in my RSP and I go bankrupt. What happens?
So the law says the only funds that can be attached to be taken in a bankruptcy with an RSP are the money you've contributed in the last 12 months. And even that isn't necessarily true if the RSP has a life insurance component to it. So RSPs aren't as straightforward as money in a tax-free savings account. No protections for tax-free savings accounts. No protections for registered education saving plans, but that's another show. Mm-hmm. So the RSPs, if you decide not withdraw the money and make it available, it's not available for anybody else.
And you're right. There are special ones. If I've got it through a life insurance company or something, they might not be able to take it anyways. But so whatever I contributed in the last 12 months, if I go bankrupt, I lose that.
Correct.
But everything else
remains.
I don't have to worry about it. So if I'm in a group RRSP plan through my work and I put in $100 a month, and I've been doing that for years,
$1,200 is at risk.
But the rest of it, even if I go bankrupt,
can't be touched.
And is there a difference in what can be touched in a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal?
Well, so in a consumer proposal, nothing's being touched. But remember, when you offer a proposal, we do a calculation of what's a bankruptcy worth. And so if money can be withdrawn in the bankruptcy, it may increase the amount you actually have to offer in the proposal. Because when you offer a proposal, you're saying to your creditors, I can pay back some of my debt. Well, the first thing the creditors are going to say is, well, you got to pay us more in a bankruptcy or we're not going to agree to it. So that's the first calculation we do. Right.
So if in a bankruptcy, because of my income, I would have surplus income and I'd have to pay $500 a month for 21 months.
Right.
That's $10,500. I've got to offer more than that in a proposal, or else why would the creditor say yes to it?
That's right.
But if I've also contributed $1,200 in the last year to my RSP,
got to add that to that 10.5 as well.
So now we're up to 11.7. So my proposal is going to have to be probably at least $12,000, maybe significantly more than that, depending on all the different factors. Okay, so somebody is sitting in front of you and they say, hey, Ted, here's my situation. I got $50,000 in debt. I got $50,000 in my RSP. So you're going to say, let's do the math.
Right.
In a bankruptcy, let's assume you'd have to pay $12,000. Mm-hmm. And let's assume, based on the creditors involved, a reasonable proposal would be $300 a month for 5 years, which is $18,000.
Right.
And obviously every case is different. I'm just giving an example. So what is your advice to that specific person then?
All right. Well, so the choice was a bankruptcy at $12,000 or a proposal at $18,000.
Or cash in my RSP.
But if you cash in your RSP, it's not enough to deal with the debt. We already decided that, right?
Right.
It's $50,000 and $50,000.
So it's kind of a no-brainer of an answer then.
Pretty much.
Because when I cash in the $50,000, that's almost for sure bumping me up to a higher tax bracket.
Oh, and withholdings are going to be at a higher tax bracket to start anyway, right? They're going to withhold at least 30%. So $15,000, you're getting $35,000 plus you will probably owe more if you're in a higher tax bracket anyway.
So I might end up only netting, 25, let's say.
Right.
So it's not enough to pay it off. So would there ever be a case where you'd say, okay, it's not enough to pay your debts off in full, but you should do it anyways?
Well, so it might actually make sense if you took that 25 and said, here, I'll give you a proposal. Here's $25,000 to wipe out the 50. If you knew you were going to come into more money later, so it's going to get more expensive, or you were expecting to start a new job, hoping to start a new job where you're going to get paid more, or grandma's sick in the hospital and you think you're going to inherit grandma's money. Don't focus on that because it's ghoulish. But
right. So the main reason for doing a proposal is, well, one of the reasons is I think things will be better in the future.
Right.
My income will go up. I would rather lock in a payment now. Maybe my stock options at work will turn into something, whatever it is.
Right.
So that could be a reason to do it, but you're burning your contribution room.
Right.
And you're paying a lot of tax.
We can come up with hypotheticals where it would make sense, but for reality, for most people, it doesn't make sense. One of the real crimes is when we see people that have been cashing out their RSPs for the last 2 years just keep up with their debts, when if they hadn't touched them, they'd still have that money in savings, and they're still talking to me, so probably we're going to do a proposal at the end of the day anyway.
So you should have done it sooner. Okay,
Right.
What about the time value of money, though? So let's assume that in this mythical example we've created, the proposal is going to have to be $25,000,
Okay.
which is whatever that is, 400 and something a month for 5 years, or a lump sum of 25. So I could cash in the RSP, which I got 50 in there. I pay all the taxes. I get 25. I give it to the creditors. They say yes. Is there a difference? Would a creditor be more likely to say yes to $25,000 up front as opposed to $25,000 paid over 5 years?
Well, a creditor would probably accept $20,000 up front instead of $25,000 over 5 years because I got the money in my hand today.
But it's not a massive difference. Like they're not going to accept 10 versus 25.
Probably not. It depends on how big the debt is and the individual's circumstances. But all of that is possible. Again, it's just, it's almost always a bad idea.
Right. And so I agree with you. My advice in a situation like that would be, look, let's figure out what it would take. Let's offer that as a proposal over 5 years. And if 6 months into the proposal, you decide, you know what, I think I will cash in my RSP and pay them. Okay, you can still do that. But in my experience, big banks have no cost of capital.
Right.
So to them, whether I get the money up front or over a period of time, it does not make a huge difference to them.
Well, and worse, if you offer them a lump sum up front right away, they may come back and say, yeah, we'll take that and we want monthly payments. So you're better off to focus on how much they need to be paid, make a deal for that. And then if you're able to pay it off quicker, that's great.
Right. And again, an RRSP is in most cases protected.
Right.
So the creditors in your proposal cannot say, we want that money.
Right.
It's like, well, no, if I go bankrupt, you're not going to get it.
Yep.
You can't force me to cash it in.
There's no way to compel you to cash out an RSP.
So in virtually all cases, it's better put yourself on a monthly payment plan. So, okay, well, that all makes sense to me then. So yes, there are. So the question, what was the question today?
Going back to the beginning?
Is there ever a good time to cash in an RSP before retirement? And the answer is, well, you're not cashing it in. You're borrowing if you're taking money out for the new homebuyers program or the lifelong learning plan. If you have a small amount of debt, okay, maybe just to kind of clean it up.
Maybe
you get your credit report cleaned up. You're definitely taking a tax hit and you're definitely burning contribution room.
Right.
So, okay, maybe it makes sense. But if you've got a significant amount of debt, it probably doesn't make sense.
Right.
You would be better off offering a consumer proposal over a period of time. And as a result, the creditors are still getting their money.
Yep.
But you've preserved your money in the RSP.
Yeah, you've saved for your future, and it's still there for your future.
Which is why, and we have this discussion with financial advisors all the time. If someone comes in to see you, if you're a financial advisor who's watching this, and someone comes in to see you with debt and they have RSPs, our advice is send them to us first.
Right.
Let's make sure we understand exactly what the numbers are here, because in a lot of cases, yes, you can keep your RSP, but each situation is different, so you want to
That's right.
talk to an expert and figure out what the answer is. Okay, there you go. So the answer, should you cash in your RSP before retirement? Maybe, maybe not.
The answer is maybe.
Depends on the circumstances. But again, you got to crunch the numbers and do the math.
You need a plan. You can't just assume that it's a good idea.
Right. Figure it out and you'll come up with the right answer. So, okay, there you go. Ted, thank you very much. That is our show for today. You all know the deal. On YouTube, you can put comments about all the things we got factually wrong here because we did the math in our heads.
And we're not financial advisors.
We're not financial advisors, so we're debt guys. But feel free to leave a comment. We do look at them. Obviously, like and subscribe because that makes the Google, YouTube algorithm show it to everybody. The podcast is also available on all the audio platforms, which is how most people listen to us. I don't know why it is, but people don't actually want to sit there watching.
I know why it is.
In a black room talking. But you can, you go for your run every morning with your headphones on, listening to the podcast. Isn't that what you do there, Ted?
I run?
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, sure. So the podcast is great when you're working out, let me tell you. So again, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, it's all there. Subscribe. You'll get a new podcast every week. And so, until next week, thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.